morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Some welcome rain and the grass on the summer range is really coming. The calves are growing and the horses are getting lots of work up here in cowboy heaven. I hope it's as good where you are. This week, Baxter Black has a very interesting commentary on something many of us might feel uncomfortable about.
Go get a job, show a little self-respect, take some initiative, I thought. But I have come to the conclusion that there are people in society that just don't fit in.
The Rangeland News looks ahead to the fall cattle markets.
So that may limit the increases in beef production this year and next, pushing more of that output into 2021.
One of the great examples of how cowboy poetry should sound this week.
But he didn't remember his cinches was slack until after he got that old pony untracked. Now this cow horse, he started to buck and to bawl. He got rid of that cow puncher, saddle and all.
And you'll hear more from a conversation I had with a much-loved cowboy artist, Joe Beeler, before we lost him.
Before we got through there was about 40 guys down on their hands and knees, and they had a hole dug big enough to build a new schoolhouse on.
On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, a very common problem at this time of year, and it has a lot of riders feeling frustrated. And a cowboy from the foothills of the Rockies sings our Western classic song, and we'll start out with a recently recorded one of modern cowboy life from Bob Marshall.
Chris Ledoux lays in my truck. The carpet smells like horse. I breathe it in and start to grin. It's the scent that I love most. I'm kind of fond of country bars. Love those neon lights. Western swing and steel guitars and a girl who treats me right. Yes, I'm a real cowboy. I ride for the brand, big sky above me. I'm a real steady hand. I love my mama's cooking. Ride a handsome caballo. Dance holding my partner. Yes, I'm a real cowboy. I've seen that look in a lady's eyes 100 times before. Watching silently my walk as I cross that old dance floor. She's had the rest, now she wants the best. A real live Western guy. She'll ask the question on her mind, then wait for my reply. Yes, I'm a real cowboy. I ride for the brand, big sky above me. I'm a real steady hand. I love my mama's cooking. Ride a handsome caballo. I dance holding my partner. Yes, I'm a real cowboy. I've seen the girls that want to brag to friends about their man, then tries to change him from cowboy boots to Oxfords if she can. But I'm a real cowboy. ride for the grand big sky above me. I'm a real steady hand. I love my mama's cooking. Ride a handsome caballo. I dance holding my partner. Yes, I'm a real cowboy. I dance holding my partner. Yes, I'm a real cowboy.
The artwork of Joe Beeler hangs in galleries. It's graced many Western Horseman magazine covers, and his beautiful bronze sculptures are world famous. He was the real deal for sure, and I was fascinated with his memories of capturing wild horses.
Dave, I think they caught 1,560 some odd head there a couple of years ago out of that China Lake, Northern California area, and they roped all of them.
Is that?
Roped every horse, yeah.
Well, you'd think, I've had fellas tell me that we got a few bunches of wild horses up in this part of the country that have been, I guess, feral horses is what you'd call them. And I thought that, had some fellas tell me that it's no problem, even though your horse is packing a rider and a heavy saddle and all the rigging, he's fed on grain and grained up and in good shape. You can usually run these wild horses down. But then there's a few bunches out around a place they call Fort Steele. I had an old Mustanger tell me that they chased one bunch for 5 days, and all they ate were snowballs and pine cones and pine needles. There wasn't any feed around, and they wore out 3 or 4 good saddle horses. This condition they were in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, I really never have got in on that. Dave invited me over there one time, and I couldn't get away. But a good friend of mine, Bill Owen, went over there. Another, really fine artist down there in Arizona. Yeah, and Bill and I, he's a good friend of mine. We've roped together for years. Him and Fred Fellows Fred's from down at Big Fork, Montana. And
you fellas were kind of instrumental in starting up the Cowboy Artists of America.
John Hampton, Charlie Dye, and George Phippen and I, 4 of us were the founders of the Cowboy Artists. And then we had our first meeting there in Sedona, and that was, we had last year was our 30th show. We've been together 30 years, which that's a long time for a bunch of artists to be together, or plumbers, or
carpenters. It must be a lot of fun when a bunch of you fellas do get together for some of the gatherings that you do, because I guess you get out, you get ride and rope with a lot of these other artists, do a little team roping.
No, what happens is now, like, part of our deal was every year we have a ride on some ranch. That was the way the deal started off, and of course, a lot of the guys in the Cowboy Artists are not really cowboys. They're great artists, but they're really, and they paint a wonderful painting or do a wonderful bronze, but they're really not a cowboy. But there's 5 or 6 of them that really are good cowboys, and we've had the good fortune over the many years to go to be invited on these different ranches, usually doing the works when they're doing something. So, like next April, we're going to the 4 Sixes, which is a great ranch down there around Guthrie, Texas. It's one of the really great American ranches.
Well, the age-old debate between ropers about tying hard and fast or taking your dallies comes up in a neat song when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. On June 23, 1965, Joe Beeler, Charlie Dye, John Hampton, and George Phippen gathered at the Oak Creek Tavern in Sedona, Arizona, to formulate a plan and create a society of artists committed to making quality and authentic art, portraying the cowboy of the West. And a few days later, the founders met at Charlie Dye's studio, and they were joined by artist Fred Harmon, where they formalized the bylaws for the group, and they settled on the name Cowboy Artists of America, CAA. They would invite professional artists to join the group and stage an annual show and sale of members' work, and then hold an annual trail ride to conduct organizational business and promote camaraderie, and a legacy was born. The annual trail ride still goes on, and in that conversation we had, Joe Beeler shared some of the details of some of the earlier ones.
We've been on other ranches almost in, from Texas to Montana, and usually during the works we get there and help with the branding or something.
Now, do you fellows ever?
And ride their horses. Usually we ride the ranches' horses only in case where, like if they're going to have a roping, like a team roping, we'll usually take our own horse.
Have you fellows ever been known to pull any pranks on each other at any of these deals, or has anything like that ever happened that you remember?
Well, some I couldn't tell you about on this radio program, but
we can edit it.
well, one of the times, a funny deal we pulled off. I talked about going down there to Ogallala, Nebraska, to the Haythorns. Well, we went down there and they were celebrating their 100th anniversary of homesteading that ranch there. And before I left Arizona, a lot of the guys, they get out and they get to looking. We get on one of these ranches, they get to looking for artifacts or, arrowheads and all that kind of stuff. Well, I was in a little shop there in Sedona before I left, and a guy had brought in a whole box full of stuff that he'd dug up from Fort Grant down in southern Arizona, and they were, he'd used a metal detector and actually found some really neat things like, military uniforms, off the buttons and cartridges and, things that actually, come, they were the real McCoy, but they just, he brought them in there to sell them. But anyway, I told this guy, I said, I'm going someplace, I want to buy some of these from you. And so he sold me a sack full of this stuff. He sold them to me. So I got up there and had this plan with some of my buddies to kind of salt the ground around, and let some of these guys start finding some of this stuff. So we got up there, and the country was just solid grass. There was no broken country like in the Southwest there, and I couldn't figure out a place to start throwing this stuff around. So one of the cowpunchers dug a hole there to be throwing some beer cans in there. So I saw my chance, and I went over there and found a 4570 haul, and guys said, "What do you got there?" And I showed them. They said, "Oh, Beeler, we know you," and so I had Bill on and some other guys. They had some stuff, and so they started finding it. And to make a long story short, before we got through there was about 40 guys down on their hands and knees, and they had a hole dug big enough to build a new schoolhouse on. And, and we'd planted it all. And it started out as a joke, and everybody got so excited about finding the stuff that I got kind of scared to tell them that it was a joke. And so we decided to just go ahead, and I was going to leave town before they found out that I'd put them on, and so a lot of the guys never did know that all that stuff I put down there was a joke,
Well, there's more from the visit I had with Joe Beeler after the fine Texas songwriter Bob Campbell has one of his originals called Tied On Hard and Fast.
I'm popping brush in Texas, where cowboy life was born. My saddle cinched on, double rigged, my rope tied to the horn. As I ride my range, boys, one thing I know for sure, I'll always be a puncher. For me, there ain't no cure. I ride a wild young bronco, I chase the wild bovine. I work on someone else's ranch that never will be mine. I know that when I throw that loop and make that lasso fit, that critter sure belongs to me, and I belong to it. Tied on to these cattle, tied on to this land, tied on to the only woman who can understand. The West is part of my life, future, present, past, and I can't never quit it, 'cause I'm tied on hard and fast. When you tie your rope to that apple on your cap, you're making a commitment, there ain't no turning back. If you catch a wild one, you dang sure always know you'll have to finish up the job before you can let him go. I cowboyed down in Texas, where cattle trails were born. My saddle cinched on, double rigged, my rope tied to the horn. When I roped you, darling, I knew one thing was true. Forever you belong to me and I belong to you. Tied on to these cattle, tied on to this land, tied on to the only woman who can understand. The West is part of my life, future, present, past, and I can't never quit it, 'cause I'm tied on hard and fast. You tell me you need me, you wanna be my wife. You understand that this can be a hard and rugged life. I have to be a cowboy, that's all I'll ever be. I promise I will love you, promise you'll love me. I'll tie on to you, darling, from now on I'm your man. To make your life a good one, I'll do the best I can. Our future is together, we're gonna make it last. I didn't take my dallies, dear, I tied on hard and fast. Tied on to these cattle, tied on to this land, tied on to the only woman who can understand. The West is part of my life, future, present, past, and I can't ever quit it, 'cause I'm tied on hard and fast. I can't never quit it, 'cause I'm tied on hard and fast.
Well, after Joe Beeler revealed that prank he pulled on the cowboy artist during one of their trail rides, our conversation continued.
Beeler got these guys digging up half of the sandhills in Nebraska.
That's right.
Yeah, that Haythorn Ranch is pretty famous for their horses and
wonderful.
the draft horse, the teams. I think they raise some big teams.
They raised some great draft horses there, and he has a sale there every 3 or 4 years there, and it's usually a great place to go buy a team or a good cow horse or rope horse, and they had some wonderful horses. We rode their horses there when we were there on the ranch in Brandon, and of course Waldo's a great horseman. He was a great single steer roper, and his boy is one of the great ropers, and his cousin there, and they're all great cowboys.
Joe, this has just been great, and before we let you get back to all the people that are waiting to meet you, I want you to take me back to your real early days, if you can, and what it was like in...
I moved from Oklahoma. We did to Arizona about 35 years ago, so I kind of grew up in Oklahoma, and then we moved out there, and we moved to town with an old pickup truck, and I think I had a buffalo robe and a couple of pieces of furniture and $1,200. That's the way we come to town, and didn't know a soul there or anything. And Arizona's been wonderful to us. I've raised my family there, and we've experienced a certain amount of success and love it. And Western art has been very kind to the Beeler family.
When did you first discover your gift for art, or when did you begin to put these images down?
Well, when I was a kid, I could draw. I just was a kid. They always come to me if they need a picture drawn. I thought everybody could draw, and the older I got, the more serious I got about it. And then I was selling pictures when I was 16 years old. And but I just got more serious, and I went to school. I went to Tulsa University, and I went to an art center school in Los Angeles, and just I had a show one-man show at the Gilcrease Museum. I had the first one-man show at the National Cowboy Hall of Fame, and everything just took off. And I've been really lucky and been gifted with a certain amount of native talent, and just tried to do the best I could with what I had.
He is such a down-to-earth, modest guy that really would understate the tremendous talent he had. More from Joe in a little while, and coming up, Baxter Black has an interesting commentary about a subject that I think sometimes makes us feel a bit uncomfortable, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at homeless dogs.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
I passed a professional homeless person again today. She's staked out on a corner at an intersection off the freeway that I pass on a regular basis. She has a cardboard sign that asks for a handout because she's out of work and she needs help, and God bless. Well, let me tell you, she's not out of work. She's on duty. On her corner, regular as an insulin shot. She probably puts in more hours than the average consultant. And did I mention she has a dog? She always has a dog with her. On cool winter mornings, his head is peeking out from under the nondescript blanket that she herself is wrapped in. Well, I used to think the dog was a ploy for sympathy, and it would be a good one. Authors, movie producers, animal rights groups, and charities of all kinds have shamelessly used animals as a sympathy device. But hers is not an easy life, and anybody that puts in 8 to 5, 6 days a week knows that some mornings the drudgery can just weigh you down. However, it makes it more bearable for most of us, knowing that you've got supper, the Barcalounger, and 64 channels waiting for you after you get off work. Well, after giving her a couple bucks the first few times, I began to resent her. Go get a job, show a little self-respect, take some initiative, I thought. But I have come to the conclusion that there are people in society that just don't fit in. Where would she ever get a job? I wouldn't hire her. Maybe she's emotionally unstable, mentally dysfunctional, or antisocial. Whatever she is, though, she isn't lazy. Oh, sure, maybe she goes back to her hobo camp after a hard day's begging and gripes about the cheapskates and their new BMWs with the windows rolled up. One guy asked me if I could change a 5. Can you believe it? Ah, well, another day. Think I'll have a diet pop and prop my feet up in front of the fire. Come here, old dog. Well, of late, I no longer think the dog is a ploy. He's probably her best friend, something I suspect she doesn't have in abundance. For her, like for a lot of us, her dog lends some kindness and comfort in an often unsympathetic world, and the dog in return gets her love and protection. Yep, she may be homeless, but her dog's not. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva Agriscience.
The Rangeland News is next. First, though, on our Creak of the Leather music CD that we have just reissued after it's been sold out for a while, several members of the Wilms family played mandolin, fiddle, and banjo on it. And here's one of their songs.
It hasn't rained in quite a while now, and no one knows what to do. The grass is turning brown, and all the crops are dying too. The cows are running out of feed, the hay looks mighty small. But God, I know that you're still in control of it all. Even if it doesn't rain,
the news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says pasture and range conditions. The price of corn and hay and a few other factors have the number of cattle in feedlots at record highs, according to Gary Crawford's report this week.
Despite placements of cattle into feedlots during May being 3% below May a year ago and marketings out of feedlots higher, we still had on June 1st a total inventory of cattle in feedlots of 1,000 head capacity or greater of 11.7 million head.
The highest June 1 on-feed estimate since the series began in 1996.
23 years. USDA livestock analyst Seneca Herron told us the 3% decline in placements during May, not really a surprise because of a couple of factors. First,
rising costs for corn that we've seen here in May and June, also higher hay prices.
Plus,
the availability of pasture, which has been very, very good over the last 2 months.
USDA reporting 71% of the nation's pastures and rangeland in good to excellent condition, and so
we're likely seeing more animals being held on pasture before heading to the feedlots.
So that may limit the increases in beef production this year and next, pushing more of that output into 2021. Gary Crawford, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Meanwhile, in Canada, lack of rainfall this spring has parched the pastures and hay crops that cattle producers rely on in much of the prairies and other areas. Some are already selling cow-calf pairs and culling heavily because they don't have enough feed. Yearlings are also heading to feedlots earlier than normal. Drought conditions prompted Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan to call on federal and provincial governments for response. APAS asked for a drought-related agri-recovery assessment, assistance with water supplies and water management, and designation of the entire province as eligible for the federal livestock tax deferral program. New Canadian livestock transport regulations scheduled to take effect February the 20th, 2020, continue to raise concern among livestock producers and commodity groups. Delegates at the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association meeting directed their executive to lobby the federal government to delay implementation of the rule changes until the results of the current animal transport research are complete. The most contentious portion of the new regulations for cattle producers appears to be the shortened times during which animals can be without food, water, and rest before, during, and after transport. Under current regulations, cattle can be transported for periods of up to 48 hours. Amended regulations for the ruminants allow a maximum of 36 hours without feed, water, and rest. Given some of the distances involved in Canadian livestock transport, the new regulations might require animals to be offloaded en route and then reloaded to complete their journey. Oregon farmers will not be held liable while fighting wildfires in the state thanks to a new law passed by the legislature. Senate Bill 290 encourages bystanders to assist people in emergencies without worry about being sued if something goes wrong. The law was inspired by last year's substation fire that destroyed 78,425 acres of dry wheat fields and grasslands. Oregon wheat farmers use tractors and disc plows to cut fire breaks around homes and communities, and their quick response, according to Governor Bill Hansel, helped prevent the devastation of small towns such as Morrow and Grass Valley. The new law will become effective on January 1st. Burger King will start selling the plant-based burger, the Impossible Whopper, at 59 restaurants in the St. Louis area as a pilot project. And if sales of the Impossible Whopper are successful, the plant-based burger patty could make its way into more than 7,000 retail locations that Burger King has nationwide. Burger King ranks 5th nationally for sales among fast food chains in the States after accumulating $9.75 billion worth of sales in 2016. Well, this wandering cowboy, microphone, and guitar in the amazing Western Spirit Band will be on stage at the 43rd Annual Ivan Daines Country Music Picnic at the Daines Ranch, Innisfail, Alberta. The picnic runs from August the 8th to the 11th, and among the great entertainers there, the one and only Tim Huss. And Ivan just called to say another couple of great country music entertainers have been booked. You remember the Tommy Hunter Show, I'm sure? Of course you do. Do you remember Donna and Leroy Anderson? Yep, they are going to be there. Leroy's an incredible guitar and banjo picker, and their singing is so good. They were inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame in 2010. Many more great performers, including Tim Huss and us, and tickets are available at the Black Knight Inn. And for more information, you can call Ivan. He said it's okay to give out his phone number, 403-358-2295. And then we'll be heading on up to the Stony Plain Cowboy Gathering, August 16th to the 18th, along with folks like Doris Daly, Ben Crane, Ryan Fritz, Ed Peekycoot, and many more. And there will be, at least 4 of us playing river song guitars there. You can get the schedule and all the information at stonyplaincowboygathering.com. Next regular cattle sale at the BC Livestock Co-op Yards in Kamloops is July the 16th, at Williams Lake July the 18th, and in Vanderhoof on July the 19th. Get all the information and see the sale streaming live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, regular cattle sales every Wednesday. Next horse sale is August the 24th. Get all the information at innisfailauctionmarket.com. Now the final item, and this goes back to when the Western Spirit Band had done a live concert somewhere in Alberta, and we had a great time. Folks seemed to really enjoy it. And we packed up our stuff and headed out to the parking lot, and there was little brother Jim working away with a coat hanger on the driver's door. Lock the keys in the van, he says. Well, Mike went around to the passenger side, grabbed the door handle, and just opened the door. What about this, Mike says. And Jim says, yeah, well, I already got that side done with the coat hanger. And that's the Rangeland news. Coming up in the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, a listener has a problem that a lot of riders struggle with at this time of year. When she's out on the trail, her horse insists on grabbing mouthfuls of grass with almost every step. I'll tell you how I deal with it when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Coming right up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, what do you do about a horse that insists on grabbing a mouthful of grass with every step he takes while you're riding him? I'll tell you what works for me, but first, as we get older, I think that sometimes we realize we've been so busy keeping things going that we haven't taken the time to see some of the amazing places we've read or heard about. And say booking a trip to Europe on your own can be pretty intimidating. Now, the great thing about going to places you've never been to before with the Spirit of the West group is that we all have so much in common, and all the organizing is done. And Jim and Karen, along with our support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan, do an amazing job to make the entire experience one you'll never forget. Our group flies to Dublin, Ireland on the 29th of August, and we'll have a city tour and a day in a beautiful Dublin hotel, plus a visit to the Irish National Stud Farm to see those amazing Irish thoroughbreds and how they're raised. Then we'll be hosted by the Irish Cattlemen's Federation. We'll tour Belfast and then sail over to Glasgow and Inverness, Scotland. And then on to France, England, and back to Dublin aboard the beautiful cruise ship, the Crown Princess. And we have all of those great on-board concerts and sing-alongs and so much more. And we still might have room for you. The phone number to call to find out, 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
At Irvine Tack and Western Wear, you won't find this.
New duds for the rodeo. Let's see. There's a hat over there, a few belts over yonder, and jeans? I could sell you mine. They're gently used. Yeah, fine, I'll keep them on.
But you will find this.
Rodeo apparel? It's all here. The biggest selection around.
Irvine Tack and Western Wear. Something for everyone from cowboys and cowgirls to city folks too. Western Wear with a welcome twist. Off exit 305, Highway 2 by Crossfield. Open 7 days a week.
Canada's largest Western store.
Here's a pretty common complaint we often see at this time of year. My horse is gentle, sound, and safe, but he has one annoying habit that's driving me nuts, and no matter what I do, it seems to be getting worse. He's kept in a small paddock on a diet of good quality hay, and whenever I ride him out on the trail, If the grass is more than 6 inches tall, he'll constantly pull the reins through my hands and grab mouthfuls of grass with every step. It takes all my strength to pull his head up with the reins, and at the end of a ride, my arms are aching. Every time he does it, I yank as hard as I can on the reins, but it's getting harder and harder to pull his head up. Well, boy, I know that can be annoying. I had one like that, and sometimes I'd be trying to move cows, and he'd be paying more attention to the grass than to the cattle. The thing is, getting into a tug-of-war with him is a game that you can't win. He'll see it as kind of a game and will just respond by pulling harder than you. Now, some folks might not agree with this, but if at all possible, I won't let my horse eat grass when we're standing still or going down the trail. If there's a group of us on our horses just standing there in a grassy meadow, I'll use the end of my rope and tap him on the neck every time I see his mind go to the grass. If he doesn't respect that enough, I'll get a horseman's stick or maybe a 4-foot little branch, and if I have to, I'll tap the horse on the nose with it. And most of the time, he'll decide that the grass is not worth the discomfort of that tap. Now, this might not be the case all the time, but I think that letting your horse graze while you're sitting on him can make the problem worse and diminish your leadership somewhat. The only time I'll let my horse eat grass when he's saddled and bridled is when I decide it's okay, and he knows he can only do it with my permission, and he must stop when I asked him. Now, I guess there's one more exception. If he's well hobble broke and I'm repairing a fence or something like that, and it's going to take a while, I'll probably hobble him, maybe pull the bridle off, and I think it's okay if he grazes while he's hobbled. Hope that helps, and for Irvin Saddles and Western Wear, that's this week's Horse Training File. Boy, our horses sure know when it's chore time, because that's when I come out with that daily feeding of Hoffman's horse ration for each one of them, and you can find out why we do this at hoffmanshorseration.com. Well, there's one more installment of that conversation I had with Western artist Joe Beeler coming right up. Billy and I watched a few YouTube videos of these guys the other night. Really enjoyed them, and I have played their music before because it's a perfect fit. They're good hands, great singers, songwriters, and pickers from Montana, the High Country Cowboys.
The moon's hanging low as winds start to blow, and day slowly comes to an end. The sun's going down, casting shadows around. I'll camp for the night round the bend. The wind in the trees sings a soft melody. Out yonder a coyote wails. The stars come inside, saying camp for the night, as I ride the Montana trail. Campfire gleams, embers are glowing, night birds are singing a tune. Nearby stream is gently flowing as I lie and look at the moon. The sky says that day's drawing nigh, as darkness of night sheds its veil. And with the dawn, it's time to move on, as I ride the Montana trail. as darkness of night sheds its veil, and with the dawn it's time to move on, as I ride the Montana Trail.
And now here's the final installment of that visit with the late and much-loved Western artist Joe Beeler.
The one thing that really I think is, or one of the many things that's brought your work out to where a lot of people get a chance to watch it is since you've been doing the article head sketches for Western Horseman magazine with the various sections and that kind of. How long ago did you start?
Oh, that was a long time. Well, Dick Spencer was a good friend, and when we first started CA, they were great in helping and promote CA, and they've always been a good friend of ours. And they needed those drawings done there, and I just said, heck, let me know what you need, and I did those drawings, and they've used them there for forever. But in the early days, George Phippen, he had a lot of Western Horseman covers, and then Charlie Dye, and then John Hampton. Well, all the CAs have had a lot of covers besides a lot of the other good cowboy artists. But it's always been a good show place, and those their subscribers are people are cowboys and people that love horses. And
Dick Spencer is a fella I just wish I could have known.
He was a great guy. I'm telling you what, that guy was. He could tell more jokes. He could tell a joke and never tell the same joke twice and tell jokes for 2 days.
That's what
I guarantee you, he's unbelievable.
His legacy is still being carried on, of course, because the tradition is still the same. Well, Joe, this has been great. I see there's probably people that are waiting to meet you and talk to you and everything, but it's
been fun. And I'm sure tip my hat to you guys up here. This is a wonderful show, and Calgary is a wonderful, hospitable place, and I'm glad to see everybody kind of get behind their cowboy heritage up here.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you.
The Joe Beeler Foundation is a non-profit organization, as it says, dedicated to the development and education of artists in the traditions of the Cowboy Artists of America. And through workshops, presentations, and scholarships and mentoring and other ventures, the Joe Beeler Foundation supports the Cowboy Artists of America in their educational efforts, and anyone that would like to make a tax-deductible donation, you can call Sally Douglas at 214-679-2853 or email her at douglas.sally@rocketmail.com. This week's classic Song of the West is next, along with cowboy poetry as good as it gets, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. This is our classic Song of the West segment. And the well-known fiddler, wonderful guy, Roy Warhurst, was with the Sons of the Pioneers for 10 years, and as far as I know, the only Canadian member of that group. And it was a real touch of class when they called Roy up on stage during their concert tour of Western Canada last month. Roy produced a couple of real nice, traditional Western albums for Keith Ward, and this Western classic is one of them, Will There Be Sagebrush in Heaven?
There be sagebrush in heaven, and will there be tumbleweeds? Will there be corrals where my old saddle pals every night in the moonlight will meet? Will there be sagebrush in heaven? Will there be tumbleweeds? Acres of grain on wide open plains, what more up in heaven could there be? I've counted each star in these bright western skies, rare beauty is all I can see. Where the red river flows and the sweetest flower grows, in heaven what more could there be? Will there be sagebrush in heaven? And will there be tumbleweeds? count at each star in the bright western skies, where beauty is all I can see. Where the red river flows and the sweetest flower grows, in heaven what more could there be? Will there be sagebrush in heaven? And will there be tumbleweeds? Acres of grain on wide open plains, what more up in heaven can there be?
Howdy, folks. I'm Butch Hawes, musician, engineer, producer, and owner of the Ranger Station Studio. You know, cowboy poetry records the heartbeat of the working West, a tradition that spans 3 centuries. Its enduring popularity is evident at cowboy poetry gatherings all across the country, and its presence is a daily occurrence on numerous social media platforms. Leading the way in this unique world of rhyming buckaroos is the Center for Western and Cowboy Poetry and the website cowboypoetry.com. Together, they celebrate Cowboy Poetry Week and its outreach rural library program every year in the 3rd week of April. They're committed to serving rural communities and preserving and promoting our nation's Western heritage. So if you're like me, and I know I am, you'll want to find out more at cowboypoetry.com. And thanks for listening.
Well, the Center for Western and Cowboy Poetry has released a wonderful collection of the words of Bruce Kiskaddon, recited by some of today's finest poets. And Randy Reiman does a wonderful job on this epic, An Old Western Town.
An old western town lay asleep in the sun of a long summer's day. That was then almost done. The shadows stretched out, and the horses stood around a sort of resting one leg with their heads hanging down. 2 cowpunchers down at the Last Chance saloon was trying to sing and was both out of tune. At the end of the street that was dusty and narrow, scratching the dirt, was some chickens and sparrows. Dogs slept in shade, and the people, they strolled like they felt plumb contented in body and soul. If you looked just a little ways off to the west, you could see the high mountains with snow on their crest and shadows of clouds drifting over the flats. Oh, it sure made a right pretty picture at that. Till this drunken cowpuncher was ready to go. And he figured he'd ought to put on a big show, so he spurred and he hollered and shot his 6 gun, and he aimed to light out with that horse on the run. But he didn't remember his cinches was slack, and till after he got that old pony untracked. Now this cow horse, he started to buck and to bawl. He got rid of that cowpuncher, saddle and all, and before the drunk waddy got clean of the wreck, he was bit by 2 dogs, which he didn't expect. Now this cow horse bucked into a long hitching rack where a team that was hitched to a wagon reared back, and they lit out a dragging that old rattle trap and swinging the broke ends of 2 hitching straps. Well, a whole lot of people come from everywhere. The chickens and sparrows, they took to the air. The kids made for cover. The women all screamed, and the dogs was all chasing that runaway team. Then some feller come out like some fool always did, waving and yelling and flapping his lid, but the team got too close. And the man lost his nerve. He got out of the way, but he made that team swerve, and they broke off the porch post in front of the store, and they busted the window and several things more. They was off on their feet when at last they got stopped, piled up in a heap with that wagon on top. They was fast in the harness, one horse nearly strangled, but the crowd went to work and they got him untangled, and right when they started to take him away, the storekeeper come out with something to say. His place had been wrecked, and what made it worse still was the man with the team owed the storeman a bill. Now, he told him he'd take it right out of his hide, and he sure wasn't bluffing, 'cause he got in and tried. But most of the citizens present there reckoned that storekeeper come off a mighty poor second. Then the town marshal came with his badge and his gun, just in time for a drink when the whole thing was done. And the sun soon went down, and a few golden streaks from the afterglow showed on the far distant peaks, and the kerosene lamps shed a soft yellow light where the town folks was cooking their supper that night. 'Twas a real western night with no fog or no haze, and stars hung in clusters so bright that they blazed. Some neighbors, they gathered for casual talk. You could hear the slow footsteps along the boardwalk. There sprung up a soft, gentle breeze from the west. One after another the lights went to rest, and the curtain of night settled quietly down on the best of all places, an old western town.
Thanks so much for making the ride this week, and looking forward to having all of you back here next week at the same time. And as always, thanks to the Spirit of the West support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. Mark's page, bctractorparts.com, can help you find those parts for any make, any year tractor that you might be looking for. And you can find great reading in every issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. Just see cowboycountrymagazine.com. One more reminder, you can hear every episode of this program on YouTube with video. Search it out on YouTube, and if you enjoy it, it helps us if you like and subscribe. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.